Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Kurt Leavins. Welcome, Kurt.
Hi, David.
I'm feeling surprisingly okay. You know, I had felt this coming, and I had mentioned it a few games ago that the Panthers were starting to dominate much more in games than the Oilers were. And I just had a bad feeling that was going to continue because it's what happened last playoffs. And it happened again. Kurt, the grade A shots in this game.
It couldn't have been close.
14-6.
Yeah.
14-6. And the subset of 5 alarm shots, the most dangerous shots, 8-2. And guess who had the 2 grade A or 5 alarm shots for the Oilers? Vasily Podkolzin. One on a tip shot. Kind of a marginal one in the second period, but it was a tricky shot in tight.
And then
his
the 5-1.
Yep. We were the only really super high quality scoring chances the Oilers had all game.
Perry would have come close, hey, because he had 3 shots. He
missed the net on his big one, right? Like when McDavid set him up.
On the big one, he missed. You're right, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Perry might have had a grade A shot, but he didn't have the Oilers and the Panthers. All right. Let's not belabor things, and we'll wait till we solve all the Oilers' problems for another podcast because There's going to be time to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a little fresh. We will have a section at the end, though, where we talk about, I'm going to bring up an issue. Feel free to do one issue. You can bring up one issue. I will bring up one issue.
Okay.
But other than that, we'll stick to our format of 2 good things, 2 bad things, and 2 numbers. Kurt, what is your good thing?
My good thing is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I thought there were a handful of players who even had a decent game tonight. In fact, I think there were at the end 5 Oilers who graded a 5 or higher. Everybody else was a 4 or lower. And Nugent-Hopkins was one of those guys who graded above. And you know what? This is a guy who we've watched for 2 consecutive seasons now slide in terms of statistics. And I wrote a couple times this year, I was worried that maybe Nugent-Hopkins had lost a step, right? And
Parasitis.
Yeah, and you know what? I took no pleasure in saying that because I have an immense amount of admiration for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for what he has done for this franchise. But you know what? He stepped up in the playoffs, and I think he's far from 100%. I don't think he practiced in the last 10 days, so clearly something's up. But basically, he turned in a point-a-game performance through the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he was one of the few guys tonight who I thought had real determination and jump and was getting in on the play. Didn't end up with any points, but in a night where the Oilers' 2 best players were -4, Nugent-Hopkins was -1, and when you look at the 5-on-5 play, he was easily the Oilers' best player 5-on-5. 5-on-5 CF according to Natural Stat Trick, 19-10, 65%. There really wasn't anybody else that was that close. Corey Perry was next. You really feel for a guy like Nugent-Hopkins because he has been with this franchise through the absolute worst of times. And now to come close, not just once, but twice, has got to be heartbreaking for him. But he can hold his head up high. That I thought he was one of the relatively few Oilers who turned in a real solid effort in Game 6 and probably deserved a little better.
Yeah. So Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Kurt, you can't be blamed for having some doubts about Nuge this season. He went from 2 seasons ago, 104 points in 82 games, to the next season, 67 points in 80 games, to the next season, 49 points in 78 games. And this is playing on the power play. Like, he's one of the best power plays in NHL history. And he had 49 points in 78 games, 20 goals. So if you had some doubts, that was fair enough. I had them as well. And again, like, we all know players who are about his age, early 30s, and they're like Kyle Turris, very similar player in a lot of ways to Nugent-Hopkins in terms of a career trajectory.
Yeah.
And he just fell off a cliff at age 30.
Oh, yeah.
And not the only one. was actually super encouraged in a weird way, by Brad Marchand in this series, because the Oilers have all these players heading towards their late 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows you, if you're determined, and if you're fiercely determined, and you stay in tip-top shape, and injuries don't become too big a factor, it's possible at age 36, 37, and Corey Perry at 40. And they're all watching that in front of their eyes, Corey Perry.
Yep.
And I think that in some ways that might be his greatest value of all, because this team is getting older, and you get old fast in the NHL. They got all these players in their early 30s, Kane, Hyman, Nugent-Hopkins. And anyway, so there was some questions about Nugent this year. And then getting into the playoffs, Kurt, he was pushed essentially at even strength in the last two playoffs. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, by and large, was pushed out of the play. That's a tough assessment to make. It's a harsh one, but I think it's fair. His level of two-way play dropped considerably each year between the regular season and the playoffs. And it's because he was on the perimeter. He wasn't getting into the guts of the game. He wasn't winning nearly enough battles. And this year, to his immense credit, he dug in. He just totally dug in. And he became the player, to me, that I've always hoped he would be through his NHL career. This is the player. This is Dave Keon. Yeah. This is the player I was hoping to see all of these years. This incredibly skilled guy with matching work ethic, which I think he's always had, but with matching physical toughness.
Yep.
And he has decided he's going to win some pucks. He's not going to be pushed around anymore. And so we see it in his statistics. As you know, we measure for years now grade A shots. And kind of we have a plus minus per game for 15 minutes even strength, which is a proxy for per game. So in the last two playoffs consecutively, Nuge has been plus 0.4 grade A shots and plus 0.6. Now, to put that in perspective, Connor McDavid in those same 2 years, Nuge, again, essentially plus 0.6 and plus 0.4. McDavid was plus 2 and plus 2.6. Now, that's Connor McDavid. So a superstar center is going to be plus 2 grade A shots a game. A center who's really functioning well is going to be plus 1 grade A shots a game. If you're plus 1 grade A shots a game, you are getting your job done as a center iceman. And if you're plus 1.5, which is where close to what Draisaitl ended up, you're really doing a good job as well. So this year, Nuge went from, again, mediocre plus 0.6, plus 0.4. He went to plus 2 in the playoffs. He was just behind McDavid in terms of his two-way play. Now, some of that came on the wing, which is a little easier to get plus numbers because you don't have as much defensive responsibility. But he played at such a high level of two-way play. And completely, I thought the last two games, it's funny, I was listening to Ray Ferraro, his podcast, and usually Ray's bang on, but he thought Nugent-Hopkins disappeared the previous game, and I didn't agree with that at all. As this has gone along, he's stood out because he's one of the few guys who's effective. And when they went to McDavid and Draisaitl, Nuge kept going. He was driving his line, and they were involved in some grade A shots when most other lines weren't. So he was dragging that line. So this is excellent news, because if he can play, let's say, 2 or 3 more years at this high level in the playoffs, it's a big, he's got the contract for 2 or 3 more years at least, I think. Yeah. So if he can do that, and it's not a killer contract anymore because of the salary cap shooting through the roof, but it's big enough that they need him to perform. And if he can do this in the playoffs for the next 2 or 3 years, this is huge news for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah. And you know what, in our postseason assessment, we can talk about, where he should ideally slot in on a team like this going forward. But yeah, I agree with your assessment. The guy that we saw in the playoffs, if you get him for another couple seasons, you're fine with that.
It'd be interesting because it was funny because there was all this talk of trading him about 6 years ago because he had failed as an NHL center. He wasn't getting it done. And I was saying, before you trade this guy, try him on the wing. See if he can go on the wing. And then they put him on the wing with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, and Draisaitl won the MVP award that year.
See, Coach Staples knew what he was talking about.
I think maybe there was more people than me saying that, but
come on.
I just thought, don't trade him before you try him on the wing. Yeah. And he's been really good on the wing. He's a good winger. But
well, he's an intelligent player, right? He can adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was his numbers in the slot, he always leaked a lot of grade A shots because he would get beat. He would get physically beat in the slot. Again, in the guts of the game, he wasn't strong and intense enough. That's changed. And I think that he might be a really good defensive center. So this could change the Oilers considerably, allowing them, if they want, to play Leon Draisaitl on the wing far more often. If they think that's best for the player, best for McDavid, best for Draisaitl, they could go with, because Nuge was great as a second. I think he's a prototypical second line center in these playoffs.
Or, and we can talk about this more in the postseason, maybe he becomes your permanent 3C.
He could be that as well.
Right.
Anyway, if you have McDavid, Nuge, and Draisaitl as your three centers, you've got three really good centers.
I agree.
So,
yeah.
All right. My good thing, Kurt, is nothing to do with the Oilers. They got stomped tonight. And I haven't liked the Florida Panthers. I think there's about 5 goals which came about in really shady circumstances because of poor refereeing. I have been bitter about that and thinking this is no way to run the NHL. You can't have a cloud hanging over the playoffs when so many goals. You know, there's the I wrote them down the other day.
It's Sam Bennett falling on goalies. Yeah.
Okay, Sam Bennett falls on Skinner in the first game. He kicks away Ekblad's stick and then scores in the second game. Yeah. He kicks away Ekholm's stick and then he beats Ekholm on the goal. Stetcher high stick. Then they score immediately. Klingberg held. First he's hacked, then he's held by Barkov, and then he runs into the ref. Clear too many men on the ice penalty in overtime when Arvidsson's going in on a dangerous chance, and 3 minutes later they score. There's a little less of a clear path to the goal off that one. But those are 5 pretty big plays. So anyway, I've been super upset and bitter about that. And I think it actually was totally the same with the Oilers, extremely embittering, and I think it threw them off their game. I think it's one of the things that cost the Oilers this series was not just those plays, but the psychological impact of those plays. They lost their aggressiveness, not in this game, but in the previous game. They were just afraid to make a play. Anyway, so I've not been giving Florida their due because I think they've been getting some really good calls from the ref, and it's been bugging the hell out of me. Tonight, Kurt, full marks. This is a super impressive hockey team, the Florida Panthers. They play their positions. They play defensive hockey the way I'd like the Oilers to play defensive hockey. When a defenseman pinches, and this is why they can pinch so well on the Panthers. Why can they pinch every single time? Come in there every time and pinch like hell? It's because they know their center or their winger or someone will be up high covering for them. You can only do that in a system where everybody does their job without question. And there's no if, and, or but about it. Every time you pinch, there's someone who's covering for you.
F3 high.
Every single time.
Yeah.
And the Oilers cannot do that. They still can't do that, Kurt.
Not
they
consistently.
Still don't have,
I agree. Yeah.
They can do it a lot of the time.
Yep.
But then they don't do it right.
Yep. Whereas Florida is consistent. Yeah.
They don't make the same kind of mental errors on defense that the Oilers often make. And in this game, as we're going to talk about, made. So I love that. It's obviously a really talented team. So Maurice has convinced talented players to do this. And I think players like Barkov set the tone on that team. He's doing it when the best player does it all the time, without fail. When he's doing it all the time. Now he'll still get beat on a great deke. Everybody does now and then, but it's not a mental error that costs them. So when Ekblad pinches, he's there, or Marchand's there, or Kachuk is there. They're all of these really good hockey players are there. I just admire the hell out of that. I think it's just such it's a rare thing to have such buy-in to a defensive system. And it's killed the Oilers, Kurt. In the first 4 games of this series, they averaged 28 grade A shots a game. In the last game, they had 9. This game, they had 6. If there was one more game, they would have had 4. Like, it took the life out of Edmonton, the defensive structure of the Panthers. And it's the second year in a row that happened. The Oilers were able to win games. Generally speaking, I think there was one game, 5-7. The Oilers had hardly any grade A shots last year, and they won one of those games, but they couldn't win this. They couldn't win the other one.
Yeah.
So Florida amped up their defense as the series went along last year too. So what a great team! What a great hockey team, and they made it easy on their goalie to look good.
I don't hate many things. I hate the Florida Panthers. I can't stand them. They're probably the last team I cheer for. But I'm perfectly capable of the next breath talking about what a great hockey team they are. They're a terrific hockey team. They play the game the right way. And whether you like them or you dislike them, that's irrelevant. I had a very brief conversation with our mutual friend at the Edmonton Journal, Mr. Matheson, before this series started. And I said, Jim, those Florida Panthers know how to win. And I believe his comment back to me was, they sure do, Kurt.
Yes.
And I thought that this whole series long, it's like, these guys know how to win. Even when I thought the Oilers had a glimmer and had a path, I thought, yeah, but these guys, they know how to win. And they know how to win adds up a bunch of little things into one big thing, right? There isn't just one thing. Like, everybody talks about the Florida Panthers forecheck, and it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's just one element to an extremely well-rounded game. About the only thing that's going to take the Stanley Cup away from Florida at this point is free agency. If they bleed players, because otherwise, who's going to stop them? Right.
Fingers crossed.
I'm firmly convinced the Oilers are and were the best team in the West and fully deserve to be in the Stanley Cup final. And yeah, they took them to 6 games, but it really, was it as close as last year's series? I don't think so.
No,
in the
no,
end,
it wasn't.
right? So it's so due praise to the Florida Panthers, who I can't stand. They're a great hockey team and a worthy champion of the Stanley Cup.
Last year, the Oilers had, throughout the whole series, when you added it up, they had a decided edge in grade A shots.
Yeah.
I don't think they did in the end. I think it was about equal this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So goaltending was again a factor. But last year, the Oilers, I thought, were the better team. They just didn't get better goaltending overall, and especially in the early games. So anyway, Kurt, what is your bad thing?
Well,
why don't I go first, because we're going to do the goals.
Yeah. Let's go in sequential order.
All right. Then we're both going to talk about all the goals. But I'll just introduce. So the Oilers do come out strong, and they get the first grade A shot of the game, and they're hitting. Kane gets the first grade A shot of the game. He gets a pass back, low high pass, and hammers it on Bobrovsky. And Bobrovsky looks like shaky. It's not a clean save. The first couple of 3 or 4 handles of the puck, Bobrovsky looks shaky, and I'm thinking, hey,
he's kind of juggling.
Yeah. And then it's a nothing play, really. Draisaitl puts it back to Ekholm. But there's that Florida Panther forechecker on Ekholm, right? He's coming at him, and Ekholm, I think, panics a bit. He makes a high-risk pass. Now, the reason he makes it, he doesn't want it picked off, but I don't think he needed to make that high-risk pass. He could have done a safer pass. And he does it, he lobs it too high. Tries a saucer pass, but it's got too much energy, and it's too high. So it's a hand grenade for Bouchard. Bouchard, though, controls it, and he has a moment where he could make a play, and he doesn't. He stands, and in that heartbeat, they steal the puck from him and charge in on Ekholm again, who's made the first more egregious error. But they're charging in, and now Bouchard's coming back, and it's Reinhart, I think, right, who's going in to shoot.
Yeah.
So again, for the second game in a row, inexplicably, Ekholm gets deked out of his skates, to put it in friendly terms. He just doesn't take the man. He doesn't take the body, and he turns a nothing situation into a very dangerous moment where Reinhart's breaking in. Kelly Harudi said that he thought Skinner should have come out more. What I saw was Bouchard getting back and just getting his stick a bit, either on the puck or on Reinhardt's stick, enough to change the trajectory of the shot. And I think Skinner might have had it, it might have been right more at him if not for that. So I didn't blame Skinner on that. I blamed fundamentally Ekholm and Bouchard to some extent as well. And it was just a really brutal play 5 minutes into the game.
So me briefly on that first play. I agree with your assessments of Ekholm. My comment on Bouchard is a defense coach will tell you, take the man or take the puck, but get one of them. And he didn't get either. And so I ultimately graded both guys equally at fault on the play.
Yeah, I blame Ekholm more, but well, that's okay. They're both to blame. Like I would say 65-35 because that was a tough pass. And then all he has to do is take the man. It wasn't that hard to take the man. It's not like it's not Wayne Gretzky. It's Paul Reinhardt's a good player, but he's not
50-goal scorer.
Because he's a hell of a shooter.
Yeah.
But he's not a hell of a diker anyway. Then the next goal, Bouchard turns the puck over at the offensive blue line, which is bad. But there should be no problem.
It's a 2-on-3.
It turns out to be a 4-on-4 with Draisaitl on his man, Bouchard, and I think it's Ekholm on their men.
Wallman.
Or maybe Wallman. Wallman and Bouchard. Yeah. And Bouchard on their men. And McDavid's coming back. And all he has to do is take his man.
Yeah.
That's all he's got to do. His man, Tkachuk, who's the danger man. He's the one steaming in late to the play. But as the forward, you should be aware of that. Like they've all got their men.
Yep.
He can see the whole field in front of him. He's just not aware of the guy coming behind him.
Shoulder check.
And he got drawn to the puck. He was puck watching. He's an offensive hockey player. Offensive hockey players are drawn to the puck every single time. And he has not broken that habit. And it cost him on a number of goals in these finals. There's at least, I can think of one shorthanded goal and the overtime or the tying goal in game 4, where he again was drawn to the puck like a magnet and they went right through him and got got goals. So here it happens again. And that's Connor McDavid. And the funny thing was, between periods, Bex was saying, well, Jake Wallman should have told Bex, and I got this guy. So you take, come on. I got him. He might have, but it's obvious Wallman has him. Who else is he going to take? It's obvious who Connor McDavid should have taken too. And I don't think it was that hard to play. No. This is just basic hockey, really. Pick up your guy who's coming into the play, right?
Yep.
You see it different?
No, I didn't. I saw it exactly the same way you did. It started off at 2-on-3. The worst it was a 3-on-3, and McDavid inexplicably goes to a man who's already taken by one of his own teammates. And the whole thing about BX is saying, well, Wallman had to tell him. I'm sorry, you don't have to tell Connor McDavid who's the right player on the ice to take. That's asinine. I don't buy that for a second. I felt bad for Skinner on the play because it was a screen. I think he barely saw it, and he did get a piece of it, but it hit his glove and rolled over his arm and in. But yeah, I'm afraid that one's all on 97.
It was a total eclipse of the sunscreen. And initially I thought, okay, did Skinner screw up by not trying to look over the screen? But no, when I watched the replay, he was looking over the screen. And then Tkachuk cuts across the ice.
Yep.
So Skinner looks on this side, which is what you'd expect to happen next. This is where he's going. So, of course, and then brilliant shot by Matthew Tkachuk. He shoots it across the body, across the action, and beats him with a great shot and he's completely screened. So, no, I don't think Skinner was to blame in the least. In fact, I think that's a 5-alarm shot. That is so hard. That kind of screen, that kind of shot for the goalie, that's just really, really difficult save.
If that goes in for the Oilers, we say that's a great goal. We don't blame it on the opposition goaltender.
No, we say what a great screen by Hyman, or what a great screen by Evander Kane. It's like, wow.
Yeah, call it what it is, right? It was a mistake by an Oilers forward, but it was a great play by the Florida shooter.
And of Tkachuk, we say he just blew through the defense. They didn't even touch him. We don't even notice who gets beat on the other team, but we just think, oh man, he just made them look sick by picking up the puck and moving in there, going across the ice and whipping it at the net like that. So, okay, the third goal, Kurt. What did you see?
Yeah, well, I have to say I wasn't feeling it after we went down 2-0, because We give up the first goal of the game again, and then we give up the second goal late in the first period. Both of them are demoralizing goals to give up, one early and one late, right? So there's that. Then you consider that the first goal was scored on our supposedly best defensive pairing, and the second goal was scored on an error by our best player.
Yeah.
So it's like, what else can go wrong? And after the Oilers turned in, honestly, a decent second period, like they battled, they in there, they played hard. But
they did.
right at the end of the second period, a nothing shot comes in from Florida, and it hits Stuart Skinner square in the chest, and I'm still trying to figure out what it was he was trying to do or thought he was trying to do. But ultimately, all he ended up doing was bunting the puck like 8-10 feet in front of him. Like the worst rebound I've seen him give up all season long. And it
Fair
just,
comment.
yeah, and it just sat there. And I think even the Oilers defenders were shocked, like, where the hell's the puck? It's sitting right there. Bing, bang, boom. 3-0. Like
Okay.
Skinner, he'd been okay up until then, Dave. Like I didn't blame him
No,
on the two goals.
He's been keeping them in there, Kurt.
Yeah,
Like
right.
seriously. Like at that point, you could say he's playing like there was 8 grade A shots in the first. 6 of them were 5 alarm shots. That's above average goaltending just to let in two. I was hoping beyond all hope they could get out of the first period with just 1 goal against. I thought they could win this if that happens. And then, okay, so they get to the second. You know what? They were hemmed in their own zone on that play.
They were
50 seconds. By the time the shot came from outside, they just put a little thing on the screen, 50 seconds in their own zone. Kulak had put it up to Skinner once or twice. Once, I think Kulak had turned it over inadvertently, but he put it up to Jeff Skinner, and Skinner couldn't get it out.
Yep.
And that was a big mistake. Jeff Skinner had to get that puck out. He didn't. So now it's in, and it goes. Barkov had almost a 5 alarm shot in front of the net. It kind of rolled off his stick. Comes around the boards again, and then there's the outside shot. Skinner, in terms of game awareness, my guys are gassed. I've got to stop the play. Everything should be. I'm rushing out there, grabbing this floater, this pop fly with my glove, and killing the play. He didn't try to grab it with his glove as far as I could see. He just let it hit him. It was such a major mental error because of that alone, that his team was exhausted. And what happens next is Nurse's man, who Darnell Nurse was covering, like Nurse was exhausted, and he let him right around him. He just let him go to the net, and the puck goes in off him because Darnell Nurse didn't block him out. Now, that's a fundamental mistake by Nurse, but he's exhausted in that moment. And so that goal is like, let's say 70% Skinner, 15-15, Jeff Skinner and Nurse. That's what I would say.
I don't entirely disagree with how you described the play. My only problem with that is I agree with Skinner not getting it out on the wall was a critical mistake on that play. Yes.
Yeah.
But there were many mistakes that led up to that point, and all 5 Oilers on the ice were gassed at that point. And so I wouldn't lean as heavily on Skinner overall for responsibility on that play.
Yeah.
Just because it was such a fire drill. And I saw the one, I don't agree with the other one, but I completely agree with you with the play on the wall. That's on him. That puck's got to get out for sure.
Yeah, Jeff Skinner. He does. Kulak was last. It was a really hard play behind the net because someone was on him and he threw it away. But that's going to happen.
Yeah. But the shot before it went in was a nothing shot. Stuart Skinner,
the net.
Yeah, Stuart Skinner should have just caught that puck and held it, and there should have been a whistle. Right?
It's just a mystery. Total mystery why that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can't say anything other. I have no idea.
Well,
right, Kurt, your number.
My number is 2. Back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals that the Edmonton Oilers have been to now. Losing Game 7, losing Game 6. We or at least I talked a lot through the off season and through the regular season in the early part of the playoffs about what a motivating factor that Game 7 loss was last year, that those guys never wanted to feel like that again. And I do think that drove them in a positive way through much of this postseason. But you know what? At this point, there's a real question that now needs to be answered. Is this loss a motivating factor like the last one, or does this send you in the other direction? And I think there's
apart the team, spiraling and breaking apart.
Right. I think there's a 50-50 chance it could go either way. It could continue to drive these guys until they get that taste of defeat out of their mouth and finally lift the cup. Or does Stan Bowman look at this team, which he isn't 100% responsible for building, and in the cold light of day go, yeah, this team was never quite right to win the Stanley Cup? And I have a feeling, as much as we saw a lot of change last year, David, I think we'll see at least as much this year. And I'm not concerned about, contracts and no trade clauses. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's always other ways around that. But ultimately, my number is 2, because I'm really left seriously wondering what this will be going forward, a continuing motivating factor, or will it push the team in a different direction?
It's a good question, Kurt, because we've seen teams implode after they lose. Like if you lose continually to the same opponent, it can have an impact. My guess is it doesn't, that it's more surgical than implosion. I think the coach stays. I think almost all of the top players stay. That's what I'm going to get to my number. And so in the Stanley Cup final, throughout the playoffs, I was tracking, okay, who makes the mistakes on the goals against at even strength. So I'm not counting shorthanded in there because it's actually tougher to figure out who is to blame. Yep. And it's certainly harder to figure out who is the primary person to blame. It's usually more of a team mistake.
Agreed.
Shorthanded. But at even strength, there's often a player who stands out, or 2 or 3. And I mark them down. We keep track at the Cult of Hockey through the video review. So, Kurt, it was all of their best players who made the most mistakes on goals against. Evan Bouchard at even strength made 6 major mistakes on goals against at even strength. Connor McDavid made 5 major mistakes on goals against in 6 games against the Florida Panthers. Leon Draisaitl, Matthias Ekholm, and Darnell Nurse each made 4. Jake Wallman and Corey Perry each made 3. Everybody else was 1 or 2. Now, part of that is they have more ice time.
Yep.
So as a rate, it'll seem less significant than that. But if you have your best defenseman Bouchard making 6 major mistakes and your top center making 5, you will struggle to win the series. You're going to struggle. And I think one of the things that will keep them together is actually that this is part of a learning process for incredibly gifted offensive hockey players. And to compare, they should compare themselves to the Florida Panther forwards, and think about how many mistakes maybe Barkov made on even strength goals against, or Kachuk, or their top players. And it is a bitter lesson, but I think that these players aren't averse to taking responsibility. I think that they do that. And I think part of this bitter experience is the very best players on the team thinking, all right, we have been committed to defense. And Connor McDavid got very defensive when he was asked about it. Nonetheless, this happened. And with McDavid, it was interesting because it happened through over-aggression. He wanted to do too much. And that's typically with Nurse, it's the same thing. He's wanting to do too much.
Yeah.
With the other players, it's often something else. So it's funny. They've got to trust the coach's system. They've got to do what the coach is saying. Chris Knobloch is an excellent defensive coach. I have zero doubt about that. They've got to trust his system, and they've got to play his system defensively. And it has to become their religion. Just like Paul Maurice's defensive system, forechecking system, is a religion for the Florida Panthers. And that's what we saw tonight, was a bunch of religious fanatics kicking the snot out of the Edmonton Oilers. And this is the cult of hockey. We have that zealous approach to the game ourselves. We're fanatics.
Yeah.
I appreciate fanaticism in hockey. And I love offensive skill more than anything else, but I really, really have come to appreciate fanatical defensive discipline and play. And the Panthers' best players had it more than the Oilers' best players did this year in the playoffs.
Two thoughts. I think that's a great observation, and I agree with you. I think you're bang on. My two comments. I've thought many times about that kind of a snitty comment that Connor McDavid made about defending, because I
Yeah.
remember him doing it at the time. And while on one hand I admired him kind of sticking up for his teammates, I thought, yeah, but Connor, we've seen lots of examples this season where you couldn't. Like, I'm sorry, you're wrong. you're not a great defending team. You can defend really well, but
Yes.
you and I
Exactly.
and our dearly departed friend Bruce scored 82 games this year where we detailed all the times where the Oilers didn't defend well enough. So I'm sorry, he's wrong. I admire the hell out of him as a hockey player and as a leader. He's wrong. They're not great defenders. They're good defenders, and there's a difference. Florida are great defenders, and you saw that tonight. One last thought on defending.
That's right on, Kurt. That is
Yeah,
bang on.
right.
They are great. They are the best defenders in the NHL, and the
Yep.
Oilers are good.
Yep.
You know, they're up there. But you know what? They're not a lot better than the teams they beat. They just scored better. They outscored
Yep.
them. You
Yep.
know, and
if you want to lose in 6, good's fine. Right?
against the best defensive team,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a fan of world soccer, and
Mhm.
you see this often in world soccer, where typically teams from Germany and Italy sometimes Argentina, now and then in a blue moon Brazil, will have these incredible defensive teams, just unreal technical ability and team play and defense, and they are so hard to beat. And you don't often get this in the NHL. I mean, I think trying to think of an example of a cup-winning team.
New Jersey
Maybe
Devils.
St. Louis. Well, yeah, you go back to the New Jersey Devils, right?
Right.
They were that.
They were
And
the
to
epitome
give
of
them
that.
credit, the Philadelphia Flyers in their day were an incredible defensive hockey team, like in the Shiro days. Like
Different
they were
kind of defense,
brutal.
but I agree. Yes, very hard to play
But
against. Yeah.
they played their system
Yeah.
incredibly well. The Islanders had their moments. You know, the Oilers of the 80s were never, I'm going to say, except for 1990, they always outscored their opponents in the playoffs, and Grant Fuhr made big saves.
Yeah.
That's how they won.
Because they were exceptional offensive teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1990, they were an exceptional defensive team, and they won the Stanley Cup with great goaltending as well. But the New Jersey Devils are a very good example. I think the St. Louis Blues, when they won it that year, were pretty exceptional defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And these Panthers, man, they smoke. They're the steel curtain. They just, nothing gets through. Good. What a great defensive effort that was. And it was awesome. And it was hard to take as an Oilers fan, but it was awesome.
One last quick thought on this. And I don't know if this occurred to you while watching the last 2 games. Do you think a zone defense team is well equipped to beat Florida?
That is a really interesting question, because often you'd see Florida get the puck and the Oilers back off.
Yeah.
So I think it all comes down to execution. If everyone believes in the zone and plays the zone, yes. I think the zone is a really good system to beat this. The goals tonight weren't like, so the first goal is like a turnover, and the second goal is a rush with just terrible missed assignment, and then the third goal,
rebound.
Yeah, the zone breaks down, but it's a weird rebound play. So no, I think it's not the zone's fault. I actually think the zone is the perfect thing for this particular team.
Yeah.
I think it's much harder to play defense the way the Panthers play it man-to-man, and I don't think the Oilers are capable of it. Like, if I'm completely honest, I think a zone is easier to teach and easier for players who are not quite as fanatical to execute.
And usually feeds the transition game better than man-to-man does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can be stifling. Look at Vegas when they beat the Oilers and won the Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm.
They played a brilliant, brutal, crushing zone defense against the Oilers. And they beat the Oilers, who were playing man-to-man then. And the Oilers were running around all over the place, like Darnell Nurse shooting out to the blue line and getting caught out there. And not just him. Sorry to pick on Darnell Nurse. But all kinds of players. And you know what? I have been singling out Darnell Nurse for criticism on this podcast a lot, because he didn't play well in the playoffs. he played really well in the regular season, and I just want to I want to say that I recognized it at the time. I got him. People were criticizing me because I said this is one of the best defensive two-way seasons we've seen from an Oilers defenseman in the regular season. And McDavid, Draisaitl, era for Nurse.
It was.
And for the life of me, I don't understand why he can't replicate it in the playoffs, but it's become a major problem, which we will talk about later.
Yep.
Kurt, let's move on to the other issues. I wanted to talk about something that I don't think have talked about too much, and that's Zach Hyman's absence. And the reason I didn't want to talk about it, not that we have any real impact, but I just remember a line in Ken Dryden's book where he described what Scotty Bowman did as a coach. And he said, the players are always making excuses for themselves. Ken Dryden did. This was on the Montreal Canadiens, which won the Stanley Cup 4 times in a row.
Arguably the greatest team of all time.
Arguably, except for the Oilers in the 80s. So anyway, he said the players are always making excuses, and Scotty Bowman saw his job as kicking the crutches out from them. Don't let them have that crutch. Don't give them that excuse. And it bothered me how much I heard, I don't know why it would. Broadcasters, they don't have much of a role on they're not, but they are kind of around the team. They're in that milieu, and they were constantly on the broadcast tonight. And the previous game, they're bringing up Hyman's absence. Listen, now's the time to talk about like a general overview, but in that moment, that's a crutch. You're giving life to that crutch for the Oilers. I think anyone who's bringing that up, because if the players are bringing that up, the coach has got to kick that crutch from under their feet. They can't have that crutch. They could win. They could have won the Stanley Cup without Zach Hyman if they played better team defense. That's what I believe. And I just, to the extent, and the same thing with the penalties, which I was bitching about. So I'm part of the problem there. That was a crutch. I think it became a psychological problem for the Oilers getting over that.
I agree with that.
I don't know if the Hyman thing did or not, because I'm not close enough to the team to have a sense of that. But I saw the Oilers lose their nerve about halfway through game 3, I think it was, like start to get really emotional and wild in a way they hadn't been through the playoffs. And I think it had to do with the erratic refereeing. And it's hard to blame them for that because it was such a punch in the face, kicking the nuts, honestly. So, but the Hyman thing, Zach Hyman, series is over. The Oilers lost. Yeah. Missing Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman was playing the best hockey of his NHL career. He was crushing it. Kurt, according to our numbers, he in 232 even strength minutes, he helped create 55 grade A shots, and he made mistakes on just 7 against. It was out of this world how good he was playing as a two-way player at even strength, and his hitting was out of this world good. Like he was just leading the charge. Would he have made a difference in this series? It's hard not to think that he wouldn't have made a huge difference. And it's fair to say that. Like it is one of the reasons the Oilers lost was his absence, and it was a tough blow to the team. It's hockey.
Yeah, when you go back to the 2005-2006 Oilers, when you lose your number one goaltender in the Stanley Cup Finals, okay, that's a fair excuse. Like that's
that was brutal.
Yeah, like if the Panthers lost Sergei Bobrovsky, But otherwise when it's I gotta say, and I think as much respect for Zach Hyman as you do. But I was kind of watching how he's in the dressing room every game and all that kind of stuff, and I thought to myself at one point, I wonder if the players in the dressing room look at him sitting there and go, "Oh yeah, we don't have him again tonight."
Maybe better if he wasn't even around.
Yeah, I just usually, as you know, in the NHL,
it might have been cold, but just Zach, stay home, man.
Right. Usually, injured players in the NHL are not in the dressing room. In fact, they go without seeing their teammates for weeks on end. That's the way it works usually. And so I don't know. Like you, I'm not in the room. I don't know. But certainly on the ice, I agree with no excuses. No excuses. Was it a reason? Of course it was. Of course it was a reason they lost. If Florida didn't have Sam Reinhart, that would be a reason why they lost. That's not making an excuse. It's your best winger and maybe your best two-way player is out of the
Yeah.
series. Like, you
Yeah.
know, who's going to replace him? Nobody. Yeah, it's all fine and good to say, oh, it gives everybody else an opportunity. Yeah, that's all fine and good, but probably three of them don't add up to Zach Hyman. So it's
Kapanen and Podkolzin,
oh
they all and
God,
Perry, they all
yeah,
tried, but they're not.
Pod
And Corey Perry
Colson,
was really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
Colson put every ounce that he had into that series. Corey Perry played like he was 30 again. But it
Yeah.
still doesn't replace Zach Hyman. And that doesn't take away from the fact that the Florida Panthers are full marks and worthy Stanley Cup champions. But if you're talking about reasons why the Oilers lost, well, not having Zach Hyman is probably number one.
It's a big one. I will still say team defense is the number one reason the Oilers lost. If they played better team defense, I think they could have won this series. And that would have been a hell of a thing to do, given how good Florida was at their defensive system.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think if they had, it's like 1 goal a game earlier on in the series, if they just limit like 1 goal a game less in so many of those games, especially early in those games, would have made a difference. And again and again and again, they just defensive breakdowns, usually caused by mental errors. So I think the number one reason is major errors on goals against. Second reason to me is goaltending. Third reason is Hyman. It's really big. And the second and third reasons are really close together, but I think the first one is, to me, team defense. Florida was just way better than the Oilers.
Yeah, I just think when you take one of your top three players out of the lineup, it's not a minor deal.
Yeah,
and when you talk about team defense,
well,
he's a huge part of their defensive structure.
He was playing so well.
And in the playoffs, he was something that I always thought he was quite good at, but he just hadn't done in recent years, is penalty killing. Both he and Connor were penalty killing.
He was killing penalties. You're right, Kurt. He was doing a good job of killing penalties.
Yeah.
No, he was their best defensive forward.
Yeah.
Like, he was their best defensive forward.
Yeah.
And he was, at even strength, he was second only to McDavid in terms of being an attacking forward, in terms of being in on grade A shots.
And he sets a good example out there in terms of defense. And he's a good guy in the room when he's on the bench. And let me tell you, David, there's a big difference between having an injured player in your room or a leader on the bench. They are two very different things, right? So,
yeah. He and again, Marchand gave me some hope. Hyman is, again, like, he's a physical player. He's an older player, but Marchand shows and Corey Perry show that guys like Hyman and Evander Kane, if they keep their body in, like, if they are fanatically devoted, as I'm assuming Marchand is, they can keep it going into their 30, 35, between, 33, 34, 35, 36. Yep. Kane has another year on his deal. Hyman's got, 3 or 4 years left on his deal.
Yeah.
So the Oilers need Zach Hyman to become Brad Marchand and keep playing well past the age of 35. Well, and it's a possibility that's going to happen.
And the things all those guys have in common, David, is as hockey players, they're smart. So even if they do lose half a step, they learn how to compensate for that by just knowing where on the ice to be and the little tricks of the trade. Like, it really, I think that's one reason why Nugent-Hopkins, going back to him, had such a good playoff. He isn't as fast as he used to be, but he digs in a little more, and he's just got wisdom, right? He saves himself a step here and a step there by being in the right place at the right time. So
yeah, I'm on Team Nuge. Kane was a disappointment in the playoffs. As it went along, as this, not in the playoffs, he was a disappointment in this series as it went along, because in the last 2 or 3 games, like, he did hit someone tonight, at least he got a good hit in, but he just wasn't effective, and that was a little bit frustrating, because I was expecting more.
Yeah, I think 2 things on Evander Kane. I think it's remarkable he played at all. Remember, he didn't play the entire regular season, had knee surgery and double abdominal surgery. So I'm not going to be too hard on Evander Kane. I think that the penalty issue took some steam out of him.
Yeah, that's also fair.
And I alluded to it in the piece that I put up this morning. I don't know if you saw it or not. Sometimes coaching mad doesn't work. I'm not sure sitting Troy Stetcher after 4 minutes of play was the best thing Paul Coffey's ever done in his coaching career. And I don't think benching Darnell Nurse for being physical. Yeah, they were bad penalties. But I think
Kane, yeah.
But I think Evander Kane. But I think you took some starch out of him, right?
I think you might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Good
think
point.
you got to be careful when you're pushing buttons with high level professional athletes. Like they're
Yeah.
thoroughbreds. If you crop them the wrong way, they won't run. So
By the way, like before, there was tons of analysis before this game and through the series of the X's and O's and the forecheck and the puck moving and all this stuff and grade A shots and
yeah,
various numbers. Craig McTavish gave a great interview with Bob Stauffer on Monday before this game yesterday, where he just talked about more about the psychology of coaching and about the need to handle this team carefully and get them out of a really down moment into a positive frame against. It is worth, if you are interested in hockey coaching and hockey psychology, it was a great, very thoughtful exposition from Craig McTavish on the Oilers. I just thought it was fantastic because everyone else was like, including me, all wrapped up in the like, well, it's the forecheck versus the puck moving. So much of it was just, it was this weird thing where Florida was taken over, and how can you stop that? How do you handle these things? And you were touching on it with coming down hard on Stetcher and Kane. Were those the right things to do, or was something else a better idea? And I don't know. But this is what I think Knobloch is a fairly outstanding manager. He verbally never attacks the players.
Yeah,
and I mean never. I can't think of an example. And he's the only coach now. Maybe if he lasts a little longer, he'll start doing it because most of them they start losing. Woodcroft was actually pretty good about not doing it either, but he did start to do it.
yes, he did,
and he became more prone to it as things went along.
He got pissy toward the end of his time, no question.
Yeah,
yeah,
that was a horrible time for him as well.
It was.
But,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think that it would be interesting. And the other last thought, Kurt, unless you have a last thought, but my last thought is this: there was that documentary done on the Oilers playoffs last year, and I think it was on Amazon or something.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be one this year. You know what, Kurt? I can't watch that.
I found it hard to watch.
I don't want to watch a documentary on the Edmonton Oilers like that, an inside story of the Oilers until they win the cup. I just can't watch it. And I don't know why. I just don't want to.
I know why. You know why? Because I felt I was invading their space. And,
you did, eh?
Yeah, and I know they approved it. So it's like I'm not criticizing it for being done. The players gave their okay. I'm sure they wondered after the fact whether that was wise or not, but that's another matter. I found it hard to watch. I felt I was invading their space. That's their dressing room, not mine. And I kind of felt I had no business being in there. So just one person's view.
Usually I probably wouldn't mind that as a journalist. I liked, it's not the work I do now, but I used to like being right there on the front lines.
Oh, yeah.
With like all the different things I covered, like murders, natural disasters, politics. It's fun to be there.
You and I have been in all sorts of dodgy, crummy places and enjoyed it, right? I get it. We both have spent like decades being reporters. I understand that. Yeah.
I think if they win, I'll want to be there and enjoy that. I want to see those moments then. Till that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Show me a happy movie.
Just reminds me. Okay, here's my final thought.
Okay.
Early in the series before game 2, were we all on cloud 9 after game 1? Everyone was counting their chickens. Everybody was counting their chickens. And they were playing the Pink Pony song like it heading into the game. And I thought, oh, isn't that the song that you play when they win? And they played it like the Hockey Night in Canada. I think it was their intro song to the game that day. And everyone was playing it and talking about it and singing it. I have it on my playlist now. And I just thought, when that happened, when it was the intro to the game, I thought, this is a wrong. This is a really bad sign. You don't do that. You only do it when they win. And every time after that I heard the song, I thought, oh, got to wait till they win. Don't ever play that song until they win. Okay, do you have any final thoughts? Or are we done?
Yeah, my final thought is probably everybody's feeling down tonight. And I will remind you that there are 30 other NHL teams that would have given anything to be in our place tonight. And if they say otherwise, they're lying to you. Yeah, it's tough to get to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose back to back, but they got there both times. 30 other teams didn't. I know that seems like shallow solace right about now, but around August 1st, you'll start to feel a little bit better about it again.
Excellent point. Congratulations to the Edmonton Oilers on a fantastic season, giving us incredible highs during the Los Angeles Kings series, especially. Unbelievable. Dominating Vegas. Dominating
Dallas. Yeah.
It was so great to see. It was so fantastic to see. And I underestimated Florida going in. I hadn't been watching it, so what do I know? I have to be careful about that, offering up opinions on teams I haven't been watching closely. So that was a fantastic season from the Edmonton Oilers. And again, Kurt, I think in the modern NHL, there's got to be more of a realization. There's 32 teams.
Yeah, this is tough.
Winning the Cup has never been so hard. The Oilers, to get to the Western Conference, beat out 15 teams. Beating out 15 teams would have got you the Stanley Cup in 70% of the history of the NHL. I think now the way you measure a modern team's success, how many rounds of the playoffs has that team won, and how many have they lost? So you take an era of a team like 4 or 5 years, and how many rounds did they win? How many did they lose? This Oilers team is doing pretty good by that standard, and I think it's a fair standard. It's a realistic standard. And anyone, I started to see some talk about McDavid choke, blah, blah, blah. It's just, that is so unbelievably stupid. Sorry, we've criticized him for making mistakes, trying too hard, but he scored the winning goal in the Four Nations tournament in overtime. He's going to help Canada in the Olympic Games. It's like when I hear so Jerome McGinley was never a winner, or so-and-so was never a winner because they never won a cup. Jerome McGinley won an Olympic gold medal in 2010 for Team Canada. He is one of the biggest winners in NHL history as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Just stick your head up your butt if you're going to make those comments, because that's where it belongs. That's where it's been for too long. Because Connor McDavid is a winner. Yeah. He is a total winner. And he has led his team to many, many successful campaigns over very good teams in the playoffs. He's led Team Canada to a major tournament win. He's got the Olympics coming up. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Hey to that. Well said.
Kurt, thanks for talking tonight.
It was a pleasure, despite the ultimate outcome.
And in the meantime, I think I said that wrong. And in the meantime, I'm
sorry that they couldn't win one for our buddy Bruce. That would have made him happier than anything else. And that's probably the thing I feel the worst about. But he would have had many of the same observations and many emotions that you and I do about this game and about this team tonight. And he just would have written them better than you or I.
I'm just going to leave the end. I don't think I can get through the sign off, the usual one. So
that's fair.
Thanks everyone for a great season.
Thank you, everyone.
Until our next podcast, we won't be stopping. Thanks again.